right? And what happens next? And I'm so excited to hear, Pastor Jason's message today, and we are excited to have you.
All right. Thank you so much. Once again, I can't say enough about Pastor Brian at Middle Tree and what we're doing to help partner with them with Boxes of Hope. I encourage you so much to kind of get involved at whatever level that you can get involved with, whether it's shopping, whether it's packing or delivering, or maybe it's giving. Maybe that's kind of where you're able to kind of get involved. And maybe you know somebody who's been impacted and needs a Box of Hope. You can help direct them that way. So such a great way. We're also in conversations with our community leaders as to how we can be an impact in Brentwood and Richmond Heights and Maplewood and surrounding communities. So we'll keep you posted on that. But just Boxes of Hope is one big way that we can be involved at One Church during this time. And so I know people are looking forward to that. So thank you so much. We are excited about this new series that we are kicking off today. It's called The Next Chapter, What Happens When the Dust Settles. If I know anything about you, is probably that you can't wait for the dust to settle on what's happening right now in your life. Especially amid all this different sheltering at home and working in different environments, and kind of how that's kind of thrown us all a little bit off. And so right now, right in the comment section, I want to know this. I want to know, what are you craving right now that you haven't had, but once you're able to, you are all about it. Let me know. Like, you are making plans right now. You already been like, when I'm able to, I am going there. Maybe it's a food. Maybe it's an experience. Maybe it's, I'm going to be with my friends. Maybe it's, hey, I just want to go see a movie. Maybe it's, oh, I can't wait to get a haircut. I don't care. Like, whatever that is, like, let us know right now in the chat. Like, what are you craving so bad right now that once you're able to, you're all about it. You can't wait to be able to do that. This new series is called What Happens When the Dust Settles, the next chapter. And I believe there are lessons that we can learn from people who tackled crazy hardships in their life. If we apply them, if we learn from them, that you will be able to be positioned well once the dust settles. Because right now, we are all in the same boat. We are all in the same boat. We don't know when we will be able to do that thing or eat that food or see that person, but we can't wait until that happens, because life for us right now is uncertain. It's uncertain. Maybe it's been that way for a while for you. Maybe long before COVID-19, you were uncertain about life. But here's what I know. Uncertainty is perhaps God's favorite environment. Perhaps God's favorite environment, because it seems that that's when he gets the most accomplished. Uncertainty creates fear, elicits fear, it creates insecurity. Uncertainty actually exposes in whom or in what you put your hope. It exposes that, because when life is uncertain and everything's kind of going in a whirlwind, all of a sudden what we hope in or who we hope in rises to the surface, and it changes our perspective, it changes our attitude, it changes everything around. Uncertainty exposes in whom or in what we put our hope. It's when God gets an individual's undivided attention. It's when he gets a nation's undivided attention. It's perhaps his favorite environment. People repent of their sin. Values are reshuffled. What's important shoots to the top of our priority list. We feel our dependence on God and on each other at a different level than maybe we did before times was uncertain. Here's a question. How many of you found faith or returned to your faith during a difficult period? Raise your hands. Maybe you're in your living room, raise your hands. Maybe you can kind of type in just like a raise hands emoji. How many of you found faith or returned to faith during a difficult period in your life? Most of us, that's what happens. Most of us, when we are given in the scriptures, was written in environments of uncertainty. Most of what we are seeing in Scripture was written during times of uncertainty by people who face extraordinary challenges. The Bible is not filled with feel-good messages for a world that we don't live in. We find God speaking directly in uncertain times. We see his hand in the midst of uncertainty. The Bible is filled with stories of people facing uncertainty and discovering that not only is God not absent, he is often diligently at work accomplishing his will in the world and in the lives of those he loves. We are reminded that God still has the whole world in his hands. We are challenged to trust him when it's hard, to find him, to understand him. When it's hard and when it's difficult. Uncertainty is nothing new. Times are uncertainty, but God is not. He's still got the whole world in his hands. And so during this series, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the lives of some extraordinary characters within the Bible and see what they went through, how their times were uncertain, just like our times are uncertain. I think we can learn a lot about what happened literally in the next chapter of their lives, sometimes even in the next chapter of this book, literally, and see how that can apply to us. So today, I think we can learn a lot from a man who definitely had his share of uncertainty. Things did not go the way he planned, and through the story of his life, we will find similarities in how we can overcome our uncertainty. So if you have, maybe you have your Bible with you. In fact, you can't look it up on your phone because you're probably on your phone right now looking at this. So maybe, grab a Bible. We're going to look at Genesis chapter 37. We're going to start there. We're going to go through the life of this individual. This is what it says in Genesis chapter 37, beginning in verse 2. It says, when Joseph was 17 years old, he tended his father's flocks. He worked for his half brothers, the sons of his father's wives, Bilhah and Zebah. But Joseph reported to his father some of the bad things his brothers were doing. Hey, nobody likes a tattletale brother. But that's what Joseph was doing. And in verse 3, Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his children because Joseph had been born to him in his old age. So one day, Jacob had a special gift made for Joseph, a beautiful robe. But his brothers hated Joseph because their father loved him more than the rest of them. Let me just pause right there. Parents, do you have a favorite kid? Let us know in the chat. No, don't do that. Don't do that. They couldn't say a kind word about him. One night, Joseph had a dream, and when he told his brothers about it, they hated him more than ever. Listen to this dream, he said. We were out in the field tying up bundles of grain. Suddenly, my bundles stood up and your bundles all gathered around and bowed low before me. And of course, this didn't make his brothers happy. His brothers responded in verse 8, so you think you will be king over us, do you? Do you actually think you will reign over us? And they hated him all the more because of his dreams and the way he talked about them. Joseph was not a very smart 17-year-old. Not many of us are, but Joseph was not. It's not smart to kind of really egg on and maybe tick off your 10 older brothers. That's just a recipe for disaster in Joseph's life, and he figures this out a little bit later. But he was about to learn a hard life lesson, a lesson that we all learn at some point. That life doesn't always happen the way we think it will, or the way we plan it to go, or the way that we dream that it will happen. It doesn't always happen that way. Life happens in seasons. We can go back and forth sometimes between seasons, but it happens in seasons. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Joseph's first season, when he was 17, kind of going in, he talks to his brothers. He shares this crazy dream with them. Of course, his brothers get mad because it implies that he's going to reign over them and rule over them. And who wouldn't at that point in time, just naturally, if your brother talked to you a little bit about that, you probably would have a similar reaction to that. You're like, who do you think you are? But Joseph realizes that he's about to walk into some seasons of his life. And the first season is this, a season of frustration. A season of frustration, or maybe a season of humiliation. He began to get ridiculed from his brothers after another dream. So he told them about that dream. And if that wasn't dumb enough, he had another dream and then told them again. If it wasn't, they already hated him. They didn't like the way that he was talking about him. And then he has a dream that's exactly the same, just a little different word picture. And he shares it with them again. So he gets ridiculed from them again. They hate him. They kind of who is this guy? And then what they do is they have a plan. They have a plan because Joseph is sent from his father to go see his brothers out in the fields and to kind of go tend to them and bring them some food, maybe. I don't know. But in chapter 37, we see that Joseph's brothers has a plan. It says this in verse 18. When Joseph's brothers saw him coming, they recognized him from a distance. As he approached, they made plans to kill him. Like, that's some pretty hardcore dysfunctional family stuff right there, right? When you see your brother a long way out and you're like, you know what? Let's just kill him. Let's just kill him. Here comes that dreamer, they said. Come on, let's kill him and throw him in one of these cisterns. Throw him in one of these pits. We can tell our father a wild animal had eaten him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams. But when Reuben, one of his brothers, heard of their scheme, he came to Joseph's rescue. Now think about this. He came to Joseph's rescue. He said, "Why? Let's not kill him. Why should we shed any blood? Let's just throw him into this empty cistern here. Let's throw him into this empty pit in the wilderness. Then he'll die without our laying a hand on him." Right? Like, that was his rescue plan. Let's us not kill him. Let him just die from natural causes being thrown into an empty pit. Now, it goes on to say that Reuben was secretly going to plan to rescue him from the pit later on. But he was telling his brothers, let us not kill him. Let's just let him die anyway. And so his brothers are doing this. Frustration happens. And then a little bit later, literally in the next season, the next story, chapter of his life, Joseph is sold into slavery. See, what his brothers find is that he throw him into a pit, and then they realize instead of actually letting him die here, let's just sell him to these traders that are coming, and we'll get some money, and then we'll have a plan. We'll kind of take his robe. We'll say that he was eaten by wild animals. So they sell him to these Midianite traders, and who sold him to Potiphar, the chief of the guard in Egypt. And so he goes to Potiphar's house. And what happens? He's wrongfully accused. He's kind of has these rape allegations that he kind of stood his ground. He didn't do anything wrong, but he was wrongfully accused. And then he was sent to prison. Potiphar was so irate with him. In fact, his wife makes some advances towards Joseph. Joseph rebuffs her advances time after time. And then one time he couldn't get away. She grabs his cloak. He runs out naked. And then she holds on to his cloak. And it says that she kept the cloak with her until her husband came home. And then she told him her story. Not the story, not the truth. She told him her story, that the Hebrew slave you brought to me into our house has come into me and tried to fool around with me, she said. But I screamed. He ran outside. He left his cloak with me. And Potiphar was so upset, so mad, that he had Joseph thrown into prison. That, my friends, is a season of frustration. He was rejected by his brothers. He was ridiculed and mocked by his brothers. His brothers had a plan to kill him, and then threw him into a pit, and then sell him into slavery, into indebted servitude. And then in that, he's actually making some marks. He's making some good things out of his life, and then he gets wrongfully accused and gets thrown into prison. I mean, that's frustration. What you and I are going through right now may not compare to that. But you, no less, are in a season maybe of frustration. Maybe that's a season that you're in. Frustration is literally the gap between expectation and reality. When you have unmet expectations, there is frustration there. Frustration is what lives in that gap. Because if things happen exactly as you expected them, you'd be joyful, you'd be happy, you'd be content. But because it's not happening as you expect them, what's really happening, that gap in the middle, is called frustration. It's called frustration. And that's really what happens with Joseph over and over and over again. And the causes of frustration: rejection, opposition, humiliation, unmet expectations. But this season is really an unfair advantage for you. This is an unfair advantage you have. Bear with me. You are going through some stuff. Maybe that job loss. Maybe that marriage fail. Maybe be feeling rejected or humiliated or wrongfully accused. Maybe you're feeling like you're getting a raw end of the deal, or that but life has literally dealt you an unfair advantage. An unfair advantage is this: something or some event that gives you a leg up, that gives you a better chance at success. Jason, Why is my frustration? Why is when my life feels like it's just falling apart, when I'm living a life of unmet expectations? How is that an unfair advantage? Because your unfair advantage is not something handed to you. It's not the lot in life that was handed down to you. It is something that you learned to handle. It is something that you handled. It's not what was handed down to you. It's not, it wasn't what happened to you. It's how you handled what happened to you. How you handle this season of frustration is huge. We all go through this at some point. We all go through seasons of frustration. The pit may be part of your story, but it's not the end of your story. There's a season of frustration, and sometimes the opposition that comes from people or from circumstances actually moves us into God's direction. It's kind of a redirection, if you will. It's kind of a recalculation, if you will. Have you ever, you see on your phone, like when you go on a drive and maybe you have your maps open or what have you, and it just says recalculating because you kind of get off route, or maybe it thinks you're on a road that you're not really on, and it's kind of this is kind of that idea that when life happens or when rejection happens or opposition happens, maybe you can use that to move us into God's direction. In fact, right now in the chat, what map feature do you like? Do you use Google Maps? Do you use Apple Maps? Are you a Waze person? Some of you still rocking the TomTom or the Garmin? Or are you really kind of going old school? I got the map in my car, like I'm going to pull it out, have it open over my legs while I'm driving with my knees kind of thing. Oh, which one are you? What are you doing? Anyway, we all kind of get lost on the way, and we can get frustrated. But God is really recalculating that route, recalculating that journey, because it's not going to happen just as you thought. But in that season of frustration, He is actually moving you into His direction, moving you closer into His direction. Redirections can cause us to move into another season. And this was another season that Joseph really encountered. It was a season of adaptation. A season of adaptation. When he thinks things are starting to look up, life deals another blow. Maybe that's been you, right? When life begins to look like it's actually moving up, he's in Potiphar's house. Yeah, he was thrown into a pit. Yeah, his brothers sold him into slavery. But in Potiphar's house, he was given authority over everything. In fact, in chapter 39, again, we're just a couple chapters later in Joseph's story. It says this. It says, the Lord was with Joseph, so he succeeded in everything he did as he served in the home of his Egyptian master. Potiphar noticed this and realized that the Lord was with Joseph, giving him success. This pleased Potiphar, so he soon made Joseph his personal attendant. He put him in charge of his entire household and everything he owned. And from the day Joseph was put in charge of his master's household and property, the Lord began to bless Potiphar's household for Joseph's sake. Everything ran smoothly. Like he was given authority. He was over everything. He was living a life of integrity. He was still wrongfully accused and put in prison. When things were looking up, all of a sudden life deals another blow. And maybe that's kind of the season that you're in right now. In prison, it would have been really easy for him to be distraught, to be depressed, for him to be hopeless. But something else happens, right? Something happens. The warden puts him in charge of everything. It says this. It says Joseph was thrown into prison. This is in chapter 39, verse 21. But the Lord was with Joseph, and the Lord made Joseph a favorite with the prison warden. Before long, the warden put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners and everything that happened in the prison. That's crazy. Like the Lord was with him, he was still being used. It would have been really easy when you're in a season of frustration and life seems like it's working out and then deals you another blow. It's real easy for you to regress and to become hopeless and depressed and be like, woe is me and I'm out. But what we have to learn is that we are in a season of adaptation, that we have to move. We have to adapt. We have to kind of move things. And then he goes from that season and then in prison, he interprets the dreams of two people, a cupbearer and a baker, and a chief baker. He interprets their dreams and it happens exactly as he said it was going to happen. And he said, hey, cupbearer, when this happens to you, when you get reinstated, will you just remember me? Will you just kind of tell Pharaoh my story because I'm in here wrongfully? I didn't do the things that I'm being accused of, and I'm in here wrongfully. Of course, the cupbearer forgets about it for 2 years. For 2 years, he doesn't say anything, and Joseph's back still in that prison. He's helping people. He's doing what he could. Everything is being blessed around him because of his administrative gifts and because of what he's putting his hands to. But his life doesn't seem to be getting better. It just seems to be kind of getting stuck. But that's when we have to have that season of adaptation. The old adage, blessed are the flexible, for they're not quickly broken. Right? Like, we have to be flexible. Adaptation is a skill that will help you through the season of frustration. Remember, uncertainty exposes in whom or in what you place your trust, in whom or in what we place our hope. When the world goes crazy and anxiety is at an all-time high, the people whose hope is not in this world should be the most stable, the most calm. Even when everything around them is kind of whirling and swirling around them and people are kind of running around hopeless and anxious and panicky. The only constant is change except this, right? The writer of Hebrews tells us that Jesus is the same yesterday and today and forever. So the only constant is not change. The only constant is Jesus. Is Jesus. And that's the person in whom you can put your hope and put your trust in. When your hope and your trust is in Jesus, all of a sudden you can adapt to the circumstances that are around you. It doesn't affect you the same way it affects everybody else. The only constant is Jesus. When life doesn't end up how you thought it would, when you put the work in and it didn't work out, when you help others and they don't return the favor, when the world seems to be crumbling around you, when you are stuck in your house for who knows how long and you're starting to go crazy, learn how to adapt. Learn how to adapt. Don't give up. Don't quit. If our hope is in this life, then our circumstances should have a dramatic effect with our quality of a life. But when our hope is in God, adaptation is normal because God's plans, or his execution of his plans rather, are usually very different of how we would do it. But we trust him anyway. God's execution of his plan. Joseph's plan was not, hey, let me tick off my brothers, get thrown into a pit, get sold to slavery, and then I'm going to be wrongfully accused of some rape, and then I'm going to go into prison for a short time. I'm going to spend a few years there in prison, and then I'll get to the level that I want to get. Like, that was not his dream. That was not his plan. God's execution of his plan rarely looks like our made-up execution of our plan, but we trust him anyway. Season of adaptation. You can go one or two ways with this. You can adapt, or you can become depressed. So we got to move in there. The third season is a season of preparation. When he was 17 years old, Joseph tended his dad's flock. Then in slavery, he was put in charge of the entire household. Then in prison, he was put in charge of everything that happened in the prison. While still being a prisoner, he was in charge of every single thing that happened. While he was in prison, he interpreted the dream of two prisoners, but God was preparing him for something. Joseph is brought before Pharaoh to interpret his dream. And so literally in the next chapter that we find in Genesis, Joseph is brought before Pharaoh because 2 years after he interpreted the cupbearer's dream, the cupbearer realizes once Pharaoh has a dream, oh my gosh, there's this guy in prison. I can't believe I haven't remembered this until now. There's this guy, he interpreted my dream, and it happened just as it said. And he interpreted somebody else's dream, and it happened just as he said it would. And so Pharaoh calls Joseph before him and says, you know what, I'm having this dream. And he begins to tell him about this dream. He had two different dreams. And Joseph says, hey, both of these dreams mean the same thing. In chapter 41, beginning in verse 25, it says this: Joseph responded before Pharaoh, both of Pharaoh's dreams mean the same thing. God is telling Pharaoh in advance what he is about to do. The 7 healthy cows and the 7 healthy heads of grain both represent 7 years of prosperity. The 7 thin, scrawny cows that came up later and the 7 thin heads of grain withered by the east wind represent 7 years of famine. And he goes, this will happen just as I have described it, for God has revealed to Pharaoh in advance what he is about to do. The next 7 years will be a period of great prosperity throughout the land of Egypt. But afterward, there will be 7 years of famine so great that all the prosperity, that it will destroy the land. All the prosperity will be forgotten in Egypt. It will be forgotten. You're going to have 7 great years of prosperity, and then you're going to have 7 devastating years of famine. The famine is going to be so devastating that everybody will forget the 7 years of prosperity that preceded it. So Joseph is before Pharaoh, and he interprets this dream, and Pharaoh is asking his advisors, hey, do we have anybody like this dude? Is there anybody, can you think of anybody that is like this guy? And nobody could think of it, of course, right? And so Pharaoh decides, you know what? I'm gonna put him in a position of authority. This is a season of preparation. Everything that Joseph was kind of going through, he was preparing for the thing that was going to happen next in his life. He was prepared for this moment. If he gave up because he was frustrated or because he didn't adapt, then he never would have made it to this moment. He would have just resolved that his lot in life was to be in prison. Like, he made some mistakes. Maybe I shouldn't have told my brothers my dreams. But he didn't. He adapted. He got out. It would have been really easy for him not to. It would have been really easy for him to be like, you know what, this is just the cards I've been dealt. And then gone back to a state of depression or a state of hopelessness, blaming God or blaming others and just really hating life. But Joseph didn't do that. He used every opportunity as a chance to get better, as a chance to prepare for what was going to happen next, to learn more, to grow more. He didn't curl up and watch Netflix until he felt better. Right? He got out. He worked hard. He grinded it out. He took initiative. He didn't have $1 million dreams and $100 work ethic. He kind of made it happen. He grinded it out. It's so easy to get down on ourselves and in our situation when all we've known is frustration and confusion because life is always dealing us blows. But one of the best teachers is difficulty. If we see it for what it is another unfair advantage that we have because something that we've handled becomes a growth engine for the next difficult situation. Because if you've done it before, you can do it again. If you've gotten out of that season of frustration before, you can get out of that season of frustration again. You can adapt again. It's a growth engine. So when you face the next difficult thing, you know how to get out of it. Keep growing. Keep preparing. Don't dismay over what should have happened or what did happen. Prepare, and work. Keep growing. When you're hidden, like Joseph was hidden in the prison, when you're overlooked, when you feel unnoticed, don't quit. Don't quit. In seasons you feel most hidden, you are not most hidden to God. He is still working on you. He is still working in you. And so it's our job to go through a season of preparation. I believe it's because Joseph didn't quit, because he kept leaning on God and being used by him, that Joseph got to his next season. And that season was a season of activation. So Joseph impresses the Pharaoh so much that he is elevated. He is promoted. He's made a ruler of Egypt. He's actually made the governor of Egypt. And so he gives him all authority. He gives him all authority. Why? How was Joseph qualified for this? Because he was given all authority in Potiphar's house, right? He was given all authority in the prison. And all of a sudden, Joseph's like, yeah, this is just kind of the next level. Like, I know how to do this. I know how to run things. And so he's elevated to this place of being a governor, of running the entire nation. Everything that Egypt touched was in Joseph's power. It was under Joseph's authority. And he was being able to lead in that place. He was in the right place at the right time. Not Joseph's timing, not Joseph's journey plan, but the right man in the right place at the right time for God's plan. It's like, I want to be that more than I want my plans to succeed. Why? Because God's plan is always better than my plan. It's always better. Let me ask you this. How do you parent? Do you cater to do whatever your kid wants all the time and in the way they want it and at the time that they want it? Why not? Why don't you do that? Because if you do, they'll become self-centered and they'll become spoiled, and you teach them through saying yes and by saying no. You teach them by letting them go through things that will not be pleasant, but it will provide a better outcome in the end. It's tough being a parent. It's tough being a parent because you really want to come in and help them and give them everything to set them up for success. But you know the part of setting them up for success is that they have to experience some things. And they have to learn some things. And there's some things that can only be learned by going through it. And so Joseph this is his tract. right? He's the right place at the right time. You have a season of activation, a season of stepping into, with purpose, into what you have been preparing for, or into what you were made for. And that's what we see happening in Joseph's life. And the thing that we can learn about Joseph's story is that he didn't see it coming. He was just being honest. He was just being truthful. He didn't plan his way into a position. He didn't plot his way into a position. He didn't finagle his way into being governor of Egypt. He definitely paid his dues, but he didn't plan it to be this way. It was his values. It was his preparation. It was his ability to adapt and to deal with difficult situations that led him into this season and led him well in this season of activation. Whatever you do, whether in word or deed, do it all to the glory of the Lord Jesus, right? Let your light shine before men that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Joseph was doing this. He was glorifying God. He was living a life of integrity. He was working hard, and all that preparation and adaptation helped lead to a season of activation. And then we kind of get this at the end of chapter 41. He says that at last the 7 years of bumper crops throughout the land of Egypt came to an end. So the 7 years of prosperity came to an end. Joseph made this plan. Hey, we're going to save extra throughout these 7 years of prosperity so that we have enough to get through the famine. Then the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had predicted. The famine also struck all the surrounding countries, but throughout Egypt there was plenty of food. Eventually, however, the famine spread throughout the land of Egypt as well. And when the people cried out to Pharaoh for food, he told them, hey, go to Joseph and do whatever he tells you. So with severe famine everywhere, Joseph opened the storehouses and distributed grains for the Egyptians. It was Joseph's stimulus package. He was open the storehouses. He was, you got that check. This is Joseph, doing that. For the famine was so severe that he gave people the chance to buy grain, and because the famine was so severe throughout the world. Like Joseph is in charge of everything. It's a season of activation. He was the person, the right man in the right place at the right time for this season, because God loves you. God cares about you. But he thinks of things differently. He thinks of things differently. And so he thinks in generations. He thinks in generations. He cares for you, but he also cares for your children and your children's children and your children's children's children. He cares for those things. And so he moves from this season of activation into the season of affirmation. To a season of affirmation. Joseph's brothers come to buy grain during the famine, and they actually literally bow before him. In the very next chapter in Joseph's life, we find this in 42, verse 6. He says, since Joseph was governor of all Egypt and in charge of selling grain to all people, it was to him that his brothers came. And when they arrived, they bowed before him with their faces to the ground, and Joseph recognized that it was his brothers. Like all of a sudden, the dream that he had when he was 17 years old comes full circle. Everything that he experienced in life, all the pain, all the hardships, all the frustration, how he learned to adapt, how he was, how he prepared, how he was activated and elevated to this position, how now he's being affirmed at this moment, saying, you know what? There was a plan for it. I wonder if you asked Joseph if it was worth it, what he would say. Was it worth going through all the pain, all the hurt, all the discomfort? Was it worth going through the indebted servitude, the wrongful rape accusations, the years in prison feeling like a failure? Was it worth going through all that confusion and anger and anxiety, the depression and the loneliness? Was it worth it? Well, Joseph has this kind of back and forth with his brothers who go to Egypt and return home and come back and return home. And then this is what he says in chapter 45, verse 4. He says, please come closer. He reveals to his brothers who he actually is. So they came closer. His brothers came closer. And so Joseph said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into slavery in Egypt. But don't be upset. Can you imagine saying this to your brothers who sold you into slavery? Don't be upset. Don't be angry with yourselves. We can beat ourselves up real easy. Don't be upset and don't be angry with yourselves for selling me to this place. It was God who sent me here ahead of you to preserve your lives. Joseph had this amazing gift. He had this unfair advantage of being able to see the plan unfold and to appreciate the journey that he was on, even with all the bumps and rough spots and pain and hurt and wrongful accusations and years spent in prison, because he saw on the other side that it was God's plan all along, because God thinks long term and we think short term. God thinks longer than us. God thinks long-term more than we can ever imagine. He cares for you, but he thinks in generations. And maybe the season that you're going through right now is a season to set up you and set up your family for generations to come. And you're going through some stuff right now, but you have to understand that with the right perspective, where we put our hope in the right place, that we can make it through this type of stuff. Because God is thinking long-term. Joseph's dream came true. It was fulfilled. It was affirmed. And he will do the same for you. See, uncertainty will expose in whom or in what you put your hope. What season are you in? What season are you in? Are you frustrated? Do you need peace? Isaiah chapter 26, verse 3 says this. It says, "You will keep in perfect peace those who trust in you." Are you in a season of frustration? Do you need peace right now? Are you kind of in a place where you're like, man, anxiety is at an all-time high, hopelessness is at an all-time high? Remember, this time uncertainty exposes in whom or in what you place your hope. And Isaiah is saying this, God, you will keep in perfect peace those who trust in you. Maybe you needed that today. Like, write that verse down, memorize it so that when you get really stir crazy and you're at your breaking point, you can remind yourself, this is just a season. I need to move to adaptation. I need to adapt. I need to prepare. Are you in the adaptation season? Is this, the season where confusion reigns, where uncertainty seems like it will never end, the season where you think that you might give up because you're not sure you can take any more change? Adapting. Seems like we're all in this one together right now. But some of you are adapting to more than just a different work dynamic or a home dynamic. Adapting is kind of the first stage to growing. It's realizing that you can stay frustrated or you can learn and grow and move out. But to do so means that some things in you or around you both need to shift a little bit. They both need to adapt a little bit. They need to change a little bit. Are you in that season? Are you in a season of preparation? The short answer, yes. Yes, you are. We are all in seasons of preparation. We are always preparing for the next chapter. God, the next chapter that God has for us. Even when you are being activated or you are being affirmed, God uses it as preparation for the next thing in your life. But preparation doesn't feel pleasant all the time, right? It's hard work. It's grinding. It's always doing the next right thing. Always. It's discipline. And it will mean that you will have to say no to things that you want now in order to be ready for the things that you want more. Are you in a season of activation? Joseph was activated to his post, but his dream wasn't fulfilled yet. He was the governor of Egypt, but his dream wasn't fulfilled yet. He was in a season of activation, but it wasn't culmination, right? Don't mistake activation for arrival. You haven't arrived yet. Activation simply means that you are being released to do, that you have the opportunity to do that thing that you are meant to do right now. Just because you're activated doesn't mean that you won't quickly become frustrated again. I've met a lot of people, I've talked to a lot of people that find that position that, like, hey, this is what I meant to do, and all of a sudden they're like getting frustrated by all the new things that they have on their plate and in their life. You can quickly become frustrated, but the difference is that when you're in this season, you've already made it through a season of frustration. You've already made it through a season of adaptation and preparation, so you know how to get through it. You know what to expect, you know how it will affect you, and you know how to get through it. Are you in a season of affirmation? Are you living the dream right now? Right? That's so awesome. That's so awesome. But remember this, your affirmation has a purpose. You have been entrusted to care and affirm those around you who are in a different season than you are. You know what they're going through because you've been there. You've seen it. Paul tells us this: those of us who are strong and able in the faith need to step in and lend a hand to those who falter. Right? Those of us who are living the dream, those of us who are in the season of affirmation, need to come up and literally help those people who are not in that season yet. Why? Because we know what it takes to get there. We've been there before. We know what they're going through. It says strength is for service, not status. Each one of us needs to look after the good of the people around us, asking ourselves, how can I help? And that's what we're doing with Boxes of Hope. That's what we're doing in our communities. We're always looking around as people of God. How can I help? How can I help? That's what Joseph did. He didn't retaliate on those who beat him and sold him into slavery. He blessed them. He cared for them. He realized that his journey was for their survival. And he helped them. He could have easily have had them killed. He could have easily been like, you know what? Whatever, dudes, you sold me into slavery. You were going to kill me. I know what your plan was. And he was in the position of authority to make that happen for them. But he didn't. Instead, he was the key to their survival. And because of that, they became the 12 tribes of Israel. Pillars of strength. Because one man fought through the humiliation and the frustration. That one man adapted when things always seemed to go differently than he thought. He saw every season as one of preparation, even in prison. Prepared even when hope seemed lost. So that when he got the opportunity, when he was activated to that position, that he would ultimately lead to him saving a nation, saving his family, fulfilling his dream. What season are you in? Whatever it is, there is a next chapter. God's not done. He's not absent. When life seems uncertain, God is not. Come to him. Come to him. Come to him for comfort and for peace if you're in that season of frustration. Come to him for hope and encouragement if you're in that season of adaptation. You need that. Come to him for wisdom and for strength in seasons of preparation. When it's not pleasant, when you're doing the hard work and you're grinding it out, come to him for that. Come to him for guidance and boldness in seasons of activation. And come to him for joy and for perspective when you're in that season of affirmation. When life seems uncertain, God is not. Let me pray for you this morning. Father, thank you so much that we can learn through the life of Joseph what it means that our life is in seasons. And God, I know that wherever people are watching, we are all in different seasons. We're going through some similar stuff right now. But we're reacting to it maybe a little differently. Because uncertainty exposes in whom or in what we place our hope, in whom or in what we place our trust. And God, you will keep in perfect peace those who hope in you. And so, Father, right now I pray for anybody in a season of frustration, that life is just kind of dealing them blow after blow. It seems like they're just getting, the more they try, the more they're getting rejected, and the more oppositions come in the way. The more painful it is, the more discomfort they feel. Lord, I pray that you will give them comfort, and I pray that you will give them peace. I pray that you'll help them keep going, that you give them endurance. Lord God, I pray for people who are in a season right now of adaptation. Maybe people are confused and anxious and just uncertain about what's happening in their life right now, that they need to it's easily where they can move to being frustrated again, or they can adapt and grow. I pray that anybody in this season will move towards growth, that you will give them hope and you will give them encouragement, that you will cheerlead them on during this season of adaptation, God. I pray, Father, that we will all receive from you wisdom and strength as we are in a season of preparation for the next chapter that you have in our lives. God, I pray that you will give us guidance and boldness if we are in a season of activation where we're now at a post, but we're not arrived yet. That we need to learn from you. We need to be guided by your Spirit, God. And we need to have boldness to be able to make decisions that are in line with who you are and the values that you've instilled in us, God. And I just pray, Father, if anyone is in a season of affirmation, that is so great, but that they will come to you to receive joy and to receive perspective, knowing that when they are at that place, when they are in the season of affirmation, that it is their duty, that there's their calling to help those who are not there yet. God, I know that in any season that we're in, that we can kind of go back and forth because God, you are always preparing us for the next chapter in our lives. When life seems uncertain, God, you are not. And God, right now I just pray for anybody who may want to place their hope in you for the first time or for the first time in a long time. And if that's you this morning, just at home, under your breath, just say, God, I hope in you. I'm placing my hope in you. I trust you. I believe that you sent Jesus into this world, and in him I place my hope and my trust. God, thank you for what you're going to do in us and through us in every season of our life. Amen.
Man, what a powerful message today. Thank you, Pastor Jason. Oh man, what